Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to explore something completely different. Zen rock gardens. Karesansui, we got some really interesting articles and excerpts about these. And when I first saw this, I was picturing lush greenery and, a ton of flowers. But a Zen garden, it's something else entirely. Imagine just raked gravel and then a few rocks carefully placed. And maybe, some moss. It's all about minimalism, and I guess that's where all the magic is.
Yeah, they're definitely not what most people picture, when they think about a garden. But they're a really cool example of how much power there is in simplicity.
So let's get into it. Like, where did these minimalist masterpieces come from?
We got to go all the way back to medieval Japan for that.
Hmm.
Zen Buddhist monks, they were the ones who started creating these dry landscape gardens, right their temple courtyards.
So not your average backyard, weekend project. So were they just trying to, stand out, or was there a deeper reason for this minimalist approach?
I mean, it wasn't just about being different. They actually took inspiration from something pretty amazing, Chinese landscape paintings.
Oh, yeah.
The Shanshui works, with the vast mountains and the water and the clouds, all with just a few brushstrokes.
So it's like they took, a whole mountain range, and then they, shrunk it down into a few rocks and some sand.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty of Zen gardens, right? They're like a physical representation of these huge landscapes, even like the cosmos. But they use just the bare minimum of elements. It's all about capturing the essence of nature, not getting bogged down by all the little details.
Okay, so speaking of capturing the essence, gotta ask about the Rishonji Temple Garden in Kyoto. That's the most famous one, right? What makes it so special?
I mean, it's truly a masterpiece. Just the way the 15 rocks are arranged on this bed of white gravel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all enclosed by these low walls. It just creates this incredible atmosphere, really serene and contemplative.
It's like walking into a work of art. All right, so we got the history, but I'm really curious about, the actual stuff in these gardens. Like, what makes a Zen garden a Zen garden?
Well, for starters, you won't find any actual water features. No ponds, no waterfalls, none of that.
Wait, no water? I thought gardens were supposed to have, all the plants and the flowing water and everything?
Yeah, in most gardens, you're right. But in Zen gardens, it's all about the symbolism. So instead of real water, they use carefully raked gravel or sand. It's almost like a blank canvas, an empty space that could represent anything. Rivers, lakes, even the ocean.
So it's not just about what's there, but what's not there. That's pretty deep for a garden.
Right. And even the act of raking that gravel, that's a big deal too. It's not just about making it look nice. It's a practice, a form of moving meditation. Every stroke is intentional, creating these really cool patterns.
It's like instead of scrolling on your phone for hours, you spend a few minutes raking, like a digital detox that the monks figured out, centuries ago?
Okay, but what about the rocks? Are they just thrown in there randomly?
Not at all. The placement is very intentional. Carefully chosen rocks and the position, often representing mountain peaks coming up out of the sea, or islands scattered across a wide open space, things like that.
So it's like this puzzle, but every piece actually means something deeper. So are there rules about how the rocks should be arranged?
There are some aesthetic guidelines, yeah. Designers, they often arrange the rocks in groups of 3, but asymmetrical to create a visual balance. It's all very intentional, very well thought out.
Wow, so much thought goes into every single thing. So we've got the raked gravel as the water. The rocks are like the mountains and islands. What about plants? Are there flowers or trees or anything?
Zen gardens usually have very minimal plants. The one you'll see most often is moss, which often does really well in the shade, from the rocks and walls. Moss, I gotta be honest, that's not what I usually think of when I think of a beautiful garden. What's the deal with moss?
I mean, it might not be as flashy as a rose bush or something, but it's got its own quiet beauty. Imagine that vibrant green moss against that white gravel. It creates such a great texture, and it adds just a subtle hint of life to the garden. Plus, it thrives in those shady spots, which is perfect for Zen gardens, with the walls and everything.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. It's like every single thing has a purpose, like a deeper meaning. But I still want to know more about the philosophy behind all this. What are these gardens actually trying to tell us?
Well, you can't talk about Zen gardens without talking about mu, which means emptiness.
Emptiness. That doesn't sound very fun. I mean, isn't a garden with nothing in it boring?
Oh, no. It's not emptiness in a bad way.
Oh.
In Zen Buddhism, it actually signifies potential. It's about getting rid of all that clutter in your mind, all those preconceived notions, so that true understanding can emerge.
So it's like hitting the reset button on your brain, creating space for new ideas. But how does that connect to, the actual design of a Zen garden?
Well, think about it. That raked gravel, it's like a visual representation of that emptiness. It's a blank canvas for the mind.
Yeah.
And that minimalist design, it's totally intentional. It's meant to make you look inward, not get distracted by all the external stuff.
It's so interesting because it's the complete opposite of how we usually experience the world, right? We're constantly overloaded with information and stuff. But a Zen garden, it's like it's saying, hey, just be present. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's another really important Zen concept at work here, impermanence.
One of the articles mentioned that, even though they look still, these gardens are always changing. How does that work?
Well, even in a carefully controlled environment like a Zen garden, change is going to happen. The wind, the rain, even people walking by, they can all change the patterns in the gravel. Moss, it grows and shrinks with the seasons. So it might look still, but it's always in a state of flux.
And that really fits with the whole Zen teaching about accepting change, right? Like it's a natural part of life. It's a beautiful reminder that even when things seem still, there's this constant movement and change happening underneath.
It's a powerful metaphor for, the human experience for sure.
Absolutely. So we've covered the history, the design, the philosophy. It's incredible how much depth there is to something that at first glance seems so simple.
Yeah, it really is. And honestly, we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
Well, luckily we have a lot more time to keep diving in. But first, let's just take a second for all of this to sink in. We've gone over a lot in this first part. And when we come back, I want to talk about how we can actually use these Zen garden principles in our own lives. Make them relevant for us.
Oh, that's a great idea. Because these gardens, they're not just nice to look at. They're full of lessons that we can all use, even if we don't have a physical garden ourselves.
We'll be right back with more on that after a short break. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring these Zen gardens, and I gotta say, just talking about them is making me feel a little more Zen. But before we get too relaxed, let's change things up a bit. We talked about the history, all the symbolism, even some of the philosophy behind these gardens. But what about, the practical side of it all? How can we take some of that Zen garden, magic, and bring it into our own lives?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Because it's not just about how these gardens look, it's a whole way of life, a way of being in the world that they reflect.
So how do we translate that, that ancient wisdom into something that makes sense for us today? I mean, our lives are pretty hectic, right?
Well, I think the first step is to think about what really stood out to you while we were talking. What made you curious? What made you think, I could use a little of that?
Yeah, for me, it was definitely the idea of finding beauty and simplicity. Zen gardens are a good reminder that you don't need a lot of things to create a peaceful, harmonious space. Sometimes less is actually more.
That's a powerful message, especially these days. We're constantly being told to buy more, do more, be more. Zen gardens are like this quiet reminder that true happiness, it often comes from appreciating what we already have.
Oh, I am so guilty of overcomplicating things. Another thing that really stuck with me was the whole raking thing. How it's this form of moving meditation.
It's such a simple act, but it's so powerful. Every time you move that rake, it's deliberate, it's focused, it really grounds you in the moment, and it's something we can all do,
Yeah.
Even if we don't have a garden to rake.
Right. I mean, think about your inbox or your to-do list, even social media. Where could you use a little What could you clear out to make space for something new? Maybe it's 10 minutes of meditation, or finally cleaning out that junk drawer.
Exactly. It's all about finding what works for you. What helps you be more mindful. Maybe it's taking a few minutes each day to just appreciate nature. A big tree, a flower growing on the sidewalk, anything. Or maybe it's just focusing on your breath. Being aware of each inhale and exhale.
Yeah, or even just approaching your everyday tasks with more, intention. Instead of rushing through your to-do list, try slowing down, really be present in each moment. Pay attention to what you're doing.
Right. It's about finding those little moments of stillness and mindfulness throughout the day. Those times where you can just be, present with yourself and your surroundings.
And we can't forget about impermanence, right? It's easy to get caught up in the ups and downs of life to resist change.
Yeah.
But as a Zen garden, it's like this constant reminder that change is going to happen. It's just the way things are.
And instead of being afraid of change, we can learn to embrace it. See it as a chance to grow, to transform. Just like the gravel, always shifting. Life is this constant flow of experiences, some good, some bad. It's all part of the journey.
That's such a good way to think about it. Instead of fighting change, we can just ride the wave,
Yeah.
trust that no matter what happens, we can handle it.
Exactly. And you don't need an actual Zen garden to learn these lessons. You can cultivate these qualities within yourself, in your thoughts, your actions, how you interact with the world.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I have a little challenge for you, our listener. This week, I want you to find your own little patch of mu. Could be 10 minutes of meditation, could be cleaning out that junk drawer, whatever it is. Tell us about it on social media. And when we come back, we'll talk about why these gardens that look so simple are still captivating people all these centuries later. Welcome back to the deep dive.
It's crazy how much we've learned about Zen gardens, their history, the whole philosophy, even how we can apply those ideas to our own lives. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, the fact that these gardens are still so popular today. I mean, they've been around for centuries and they still feel so relevant. Why is that? What is it about these seemingly simple designs that just keeps drawing people in?
It's a good question. And I think it's because they offer something that's really hard to find these days. A sense of peace,
Rare.
tranquility, and a connection to something bigger than ourselves. I was actually looking at some photos of Zen gardens during the break, and even just seeing those images on my screen, I felt calmer. It's like they have this power to just transport you to a place where all that noise from the world just fades away, and you can just breathe.
Exactly. Our world is so demanding, constantly asking for our attention, bombarding us with information. But a Zen garden, it's like a sanctuary, a place where you can reconnect with that, inner stillness.
It's like they're saying, hey, slow down for a minute, just breathe. Everything's crazy out there, but right here, right now, it's okay.
I love that. And I think that's a message that resonates with everyone, no matter where they're from, what they believe in. Because deep down, we all want peace. We all want to feel connected, and we're all trying to figure out what it all means.
Yeah, and a Zen garden, it just does that in this quiet, simple way. It invites you to slow down, to pay attention, to see the beauty in the everyday stuff. It reminds you that you don't have to go climb a mountain to find peace. It's already inside you. You just got to know where to look.
And maybe, just maybe, spending time thinking about a Zen garden, whether it's a real one or just one in your mind, maybe that helps us see the world differently. Start to appreciate the simple things, the stillness in the middle of all the craziness, how everything's connected.
So as we finish up this deep dive, I want to encourage you, our listener, to take a little bit of that Zen garden spirit with you, wherever you go, whether you're in the middle of a busy city or just sitting at home. Remember all the things we talked about today.
Keep it simple. Be mindful. Find the beauty in the ordinary. Let go of the stuff you don't need.
And remember, even though our deep dive is ending, your journey's not over. Keep looking for those peaceful moments. Cultivate that inner stillness. And remember that you're part of something so much bigger, something beautiful and connected.
Well said. And thank you for joining us on this journey exploring these Zen gardens. Until next time, I hope you find peace and tranquility in everything you do.